Okay, you ready for this? Let's hope this records properly this time. Wow. Okay. That was really, really annoying. Okay. Chapter 2. Kate Malone drove down the cedar-lined gravel road towards Paige Kincaid's cottage and let the breeze from the half-open window flutter through her long, loose hair. It had been a gorgeous day, perfect for a leisurely drive from the city, and now, as the sun was just beginning its pink and orange watercolor descent into the horizon, the crispness of the breeze tickled her and raised goosebumps on her arms. It might be June, but whatever warmth the day had brought was quickly being overtaken by decidedly spring-like temperatures now, almost verging on downright cold. She drove the hills and winding turns at a deliberate pace, enjoying the scent of cedar on the wind and the faint sounds of the lake birds in the distance. Even the crunch of gravel beneath her tires somehow reminded her of all the summers she'd spent up here as a child, and she smiled at the memories. She wasn't in any real hurry to get to the cottage tonight. As much as she was looking forward to spending her birthday weekend with her old friends, she needed a little more time to center herself before facing them again after so many years. How many years had it been? She was 29. No, 30, she gulped, trying to dismiss the lump that settled in her stomach at that word. She had left town for a promising job in the city the summer she'd turned 20. Janie Mac, had it really been 10 years? It hardly seemed possible. 10 years living in the city? 10 years of frustration, of thwarted hopes, of dashed dreams. She'd stayed in touch with Paige and a few others over the years, had been back to Cedar Lake for weekend visits, and had hosted some friends at her condo in the city. But she couldn't deny the simple truth of it. She hadn't truly been back here in any real way in nearly a decade. She inhaled deeply and tried to calm herself, gripping the wheel of her beloved Mini Cooper with tight fingers. Never mind, she told herself. None of it mattered now. So what if she'd wasted a few years chasing the wrong job, the wrong men, in the wrong town? People were entitled to make a few mistakes in life, right? Besides, she was determined not to waste another minute, starting now. The roof of Paige's cabin came into view as she drove down a steep hill and turned off the road at a hand-carved wooden sign marked Kincaid. Despite her trepidation, she couldn't help but smile at the memories of all their teenage adventures up here at Paige's grandfather's cabin. The fact that her best friend had had almost unrestricted access to a cottage on the lake, not 20 minutes outside town, had been the bonus of all bonuses to the teenaged Kate, and to so many of their friends. A place of true escape, of simple relaxation and fun, and a place to enjoy the outdoors, and just be yourself for a little while. And a place to ogle Paige's brother Noah. The thought snapped her back to reality as she pulled her Mini Cooper alongside Paige's battle-scarred 20-year-old black Jeep Cherokee. Kate turned off the ignition and set the parking brake, sitting back pensively as the engine ticked and cooled. She was going to have to prepare herself for the Noah situation. She knew that. He was going to be here this weekend. It was his birthday, too, after all. And she was going to have to act all friendly and chatty and greet him with phony hugs and kisses and "how have you been?" like he hadn't been the stuff of daydreams for most of her adolescence and young adulthood, and like she didn't think about him even now with a wistful kind of nostalgia and a poignant tinge of what if. Noah had been her first real crush, the first boy to awaken that part of her that wanted something more than friendship, the first boy who made her look twice and then look again, who had made her heart beat a little faster, who made her laugh and blush and feel all self-conscious and stupid. In other words, the first boy she'd ever loved. And oh, wouldn't it have been Hollywood-worthy if he'd loved her right back and they'd run off to Las Vegas on their shared 18th birthday to get utterly irresponsibly married to the chagrin of their mothers and the wags of the town. Wouldn't it be great if they were celebrating their 12th anniversary this weekend, with a few of their gorgeous, tow-headed little kids running around, making way too much noise? Well, there was a reason Hollywood made so much damn money churning out romantic nonsense like that. It just didn't happen in real life, no matter how badly everyone seemed to want it. From the very beginning, Noah had been a free spirit and a bit of a rogue, with a quick wink and a sexy smile for all the prettiest girls in school. The last thing he'd wanted was a serious girlfriend, and even if he had, he certainly wouldn't have gone for quiet, studious Katie Malone. He'd been a tomcat, a wanderer, even back then, and if there's one thing the last few years had taught her, it was that men, like leopards, didn't change their spots. He would probably show up at the cottage tonight with a bimbo du jour, she thought uncharitably, before chastising herself for being so catty. Why shouldn't a guy like Noah hook up with a sexy, flirtatious woman? He was a sexy, flirtatious man. She hadn't dared talk to him the last time she'd been in town for the day, over 5 years ago, but she'd caught a glimpse of him in his paramedic uniform, leaning casually against his ambulance, arms folded across his broad chest, listening intently to a gorgeous young thing as she flirted and flittered around him like a bright little butterfly. Of course he'd be drawn to girls like her. He might even want to spend his birthday weekend with such a girl, Kate thought with a sudden jolt. And wouldn't that be just wonderful? Stop it. Just stop it. It was absolutely none of her business what he did or with whom. She'd just have to do what she'd spent most of her adolescence doing, ignoring him. Or rather, pretending to ignore him. Pretending he wasn't the sexiest man she had ever... Oh, enough of this, she admonished herself. She could do this. She had her plan now, and Noah Kincaid would not be part of it. NMFA. She repeated the letters to herself on a deep breath and quickly stepped out of the car. No more fucking around. She had brought a fruit and cheese plate for the gathering and now balanced it expertly on one hand as she slung her overnight bag over her other shoulder and crunched across the weedy gravel drive that led to the front door of the cabin. The cottage hadn't changed in 10 years, she marveled, looking up at the slender saplings sprouting from the eaves and at the cracked and curling shingles on the rippling roof. Off to her left, a hammock stretched lazily between 2 trees, and down along the rocky slope to her right, small solar-powered lights curved in a guiding arc towards the dock and the cool, clear water of the lake. It was comfortable, this old place. It was a true cottage, not a bit like the modern, ultra-slick, ultra-rich mansions that had started to spring up along the South Shore. It was a place to sleep and shelter from the summer sun, to play board games during a thunderstorm, a place to just hang out and enjoy the summer, nothing more. Growing up with just her mom, having never even known her dad, and with no siblings to squabble with, this place had been a refuge for her, filled with the noisy laughter and love of Paige's family. It wasn't until years later that Kate realized that the Kincaids had been a fatherless family too, their happiness held together by the fierce determination of Paige and Noah's mom and grandparents. Summers spent up here with them had been the best of Kate's life, and even just seeing the old place now brought back such poignant memories she couldn't help but smile. She heard the voices then, happy, buoyant voices coming from the sun deck around back. She heard Paige's familiar peal of laughter and lower male voices joining in, everyone obviously enjoying some sudden joke. Even from out here, she knew Noah wasn't among them. She'd know his rich, almost husky voice anywhere, even after all these years. She felt oddly relieved that it wasn't his voice she heard, relieved and a little disappointed at the same time. She decided against taking the precarious pathway around back, and instead opened the wooden screen door that led directly to the kitchen area of the cabin's great room. She opened the 70s-era fridge and slid the cheese tray in, pushing aside the beer and sodas that cluttered up the only shelf. She glanced out the large front windows and saw Paige standing against the railing with her back to the cabin, talking animatedly to Callum Barnes, another old friend from high school. Beside him, sitting in one of the chaises longs, was Lily Graham, looking exactly as she had in high school, right down to her Rachel from Friends streaked hair and her grunge-inspired floral sundress and hiking boots. At this distance, she could have passed for a 16-year-old helplessly trapped in 1995. Lily was talking to a young woman Kate didn't know, a small, athletic-looking brunette with sharp, pretty features and a friendly smile. Kate thought vaguely that she had seen her around town, but didn't know her name. "It's standing beside Lily's chair, was perhaps the beefiest man Kate had ever seen. He was squat and compact, probably no taller than Lily herself, but muscular in a way that screamed gym rat and made him look like someone had blown him up with a bike pump. His tight t-shirt stretched across his puffed-up pecs, and his biceps were so large he looked like he couldn't quite put his arms down. He had an open, inquisitive face and a ready laugh, judging by the guffawing that erupted from him whenever Lily spoke. Kate scanned the faces of the other guests, a few couples apparently, and saw no one she recognized. One or two of them looked vaguely familiar, as if she had taken grade 10 chemistry with them, maybe, or had been paired with them for a despised group project on the use of irony in Hamlet, and had been happy enough to never lay eyes on them again. Or maybe they just reminded her of regulars on her favorite TV show. It was impossible to tell. Regardless, they sparked no real recognition in her, and for a moment she felt a pang of uneasiness, and even mild jealousy. These were Paige's friends, or maybe Noah's, and she knew nothing about them. It was only to be expected, of course. High school had been a long time ago, after all. New friends and acquaintances came and went all the time, but suddenly it hit Kate just how long it had been since she'd stood in this kitchen on a night like this, sharing a summer barbecue with her best friend and the boy she secretly adored. She stood for a moment, allowing herself this solitude to just look at her old friends. Even with his back to the cabin, Kate could see how Callum had filled out quite a bit. No longer the skinny, gangly kid he had been in high school. He was still lean and lithe, and only a hair taller than Paige, but now he exuded taut strength and confidence like he never had before. He was a cop, Kate remembered. He had worked in the city, like Noah had, before something had brought him back here, something he never liked to talk about. Now, according to Paige's email updates, he was a regular Auntie Griffith, swaggering around town in his cute little uniform, enjoying his role as de facto sheriff. And enjoying being around Paige. The way he looked at her, the way his eyes roamed over her face as she spoke, it almost gave Kate chills. They were just friends, had always been just friends, but Kate always thought something else might bloom there if the soil was tilled just right. She thought of heading out to the deck to announce her arrival, but something stopped her. Maybe it was the way Paige and Callum were engaged with each other, talking so happily, that made her pause. Maybe it was the idea of just watching a happy group of friends for a few more moments before she broke up their conversations and became the center of attention, but she found she didn't want to go out there just yet. She glanced down the hall towards the bedrooms and decided to put her things away first. Paige's old bedroom was the obvious choice if she was staying here, she thought, remembering how gorgeous the morning light was in there. And that bottom bunk, it was probably the most heavenly sleep she'd ever had, even if she'd had to battle both Paige and Lily for it, and ended up wedged in there with them both on more than one occasion, their toe-ringed feet bumping into her head as they tossed and turned. She pushed open the door to the bedroom and stepped inside, the warm, spicy scent of cedar almost overwhelming her. Just like she remembered, she smiled, dropping her bag on the old rocking chair that sat beneath the window. So sharp and cottagey, so pungent but soft at the same time. She breathed it in, realizing it had been too long since she'd smelled something so earthy and nice. She reached into her bag and started pulling out several of the paperback novels she was rarely ever without. There were tons of musty old books up here, she knew, shelves full of them in the great room, and more piled in boxes in the main bedroom. But it would be hard to sort through them all to find a gem. Paige ran the town's bookstore and general hangout, Lizzie and Fitz, which her grandfather had started decades ago under the simple name Benjamin Kincaid, bookseller. Paige had often said she wanted to eventually get every one of her grandfather's old books out of here and down into the store, but it was a daunting prospect. The man had been a book fanatic, collecting anything and everything and having nowhere else to store them temporarily but up here, in the worst environment possible for fragile old books. As with most out-of-control collectors, he'd never gotten around to moving them, and too many gorgeous old tomes had succumbed to mold and water damage and the ravages of time. Kate had decided that the first thing she was going to do once she got settled was help Paige sort and inventory them once and for all. Well, maybe not the first thing. First, she had to get her business going, and find a permanent place to live, and a greenhouse, and... Hey, Malone. The voice from the door startled her, and Kate jumped. She didn't need to turn to know who it was. But when she did turn, Janie Mack, what a gorgeous, gorgeous man. Noah Kincaid leaned casually in the doorway, his arms crossed over his broad chest. He was wearing nothing special, really, just a pair of faded jeans and a blue cotton shirt, but it was how he wore them that just about took her breath away. The shirt stretched across his toned chest, hugged his biceps, and billowed loose a little where his waist tapered in. Now that was how muscles were supposed to look, she thought wistfully. Hard-won from hard work and real life. His jeans were loose and casual, but showed off legs that were almost as long as she was tall. Or at least that's how it seemed from where she was standing. He was barefoot, too, and she found her eyes traveling down the length of him to focus on those impertinent toes, before drifting back up to his impish, grinning, ridiculously good-looking face. After what felt like an hour, but had mercifully probably only been a few seconds, Kate was able to stop ogling him and smile breezily, as though standing this close to him was absolutely no big deal. "Hey, Noah," she said in a high, almost sing-song voice. "Long time no see." Should she step forward to hug him? No, that wasn't a good idea. So she smiled brightly instead. "How are you?" "Good," he said, his blue eyes sparkling at her. It looked like he was trying not to smile, actually. It looked like he was trying not to laugh. Like he was bursting to reveal some punchline, or like he was aiming for serious and mysterious, but wasn't quite pulling it off. In a second, his composure broke, and he stepped towards her. "Come here, give me a hug," he said, holding his arms open. "It's been too long." A shiver of apprehension rippled through her. So she was just supposed to hug him, just like that? Just step into his arms after so many years? She stepped forward awkwardly and dropped a paperback she'd been holding, watching helplessly as the pages fluttered as it tumbled to the floor. She bent down quickly to pick it up, thankful that he didn't bend at the same time. A cringe-worthy head bump was all she needed right now. When she straightened, she could feel the heat rising to her cheeks, but he was just standing there, one eyebrow quirked, a smile struggling to break through his pursed lips. "I'm such a klutz," she laughed, tossing the book on the bed. "I never said that," he said, smiling at her. The way he said it, as though she had just accused him of insulting her, made her glance up at him. She hadn't implied he had, of course, but he was grinning at her in such an odd way. She was sure she was missing something. She studied him, trying to figure it out, and mildly embarrassed that she didn't already know what was making him so happy. She noticed how the years had changed his face, and his smile in particular. More lines, perhaps, but good lines. Laugh lines. Crinkles and creases that only made his handsome features seem more masculine, not like the boyish prettiness he'd possessed as a teenager. His skin didn't look as soft, even though he was clean-shaven. It looked tanned and somehow hardier, like he'd braced a few harsh winds in his life. He was all man now, that was for sure. Her eyes drifted involuntarily to his shoulders. Had he turned into an Olympic swimmer or something? He must have been 2 feet broader than he used to be. Okay, that was an exaggeration. A tiny one. "You okay?" he asked, his other eyebrow joining its lofty mate. "What? Oh, yeah, sure. Sorry, it's just been a long day." She carefully avoided his eyes and stepped towards him, encircling him loosely, like he was a socialite acquaintance she felt obligated to embrace. "It's good to see you." "Come on, that's not a hug," he said, and pulled her into his arms, squeezing her so tightly she couldn't breathe. If she thought he had looked strong, by God, the power of the man was overwhelming. His arms positively crushed her within their grip as she felt herself go limp. Purely a defensive move, she told herself. Loose limbs don't break as easily. But it was more than that. The feel of him surrounding her so completely, the strength of those powerful arms holding her, the rock-solid feel of his chest against hers, especially since it had been so long, too long, since she'd been held like that. Breathing could wait. As if he could tell he was squeezing the life out of her, he suddenly loosened his grip and stepped back, letting his hands come to rest on her hips. Casually, in a friendly way, but still on her hips. He was looking down at her as if he had never seen her before. If his eyes hadn't been such a sweet shade of blue, if they hadn't been so expressive, so playful, so like the Noah she had known all those years ago, she would have looked away or swatted him or changed the subject or something, but she was caught up in his eyes and felt herself smiling in response to the mischievous smile that lit his face as he continued to look at her. "What?" she finally managed, the words slipping out between lips she was trying to prevent from breaking into a full-out grin. "Why are you looking at me so strangely?" "I just haven't seen you in a while, Katie May," he said. Katie May. Her stomach clenched. God, she hadn't heard that endearment in nearly 15 years. He'd found out her middle name one day in school and had teased her with it, calling her Katie May with a deep southern accent like she was a Beverly hillbilly. She narrowed her eyes at him warningly, but inside, her heart started thudding against her chest in a pathetic, needy beat. "Steady, girl," she told herself. "Don't start crushing on him again. NMFA, remember? NMFA. She stepped back and felt his hand slide off her as he let her go. She managed a self-conscious laugh, stymied for what to say. She had never been good at coquettish banter, at the playful quips that girls like Lily Graham had always been so good at. You'd think after so many years and 3 long-term relationships, she'd have learned how to talk to a man. But, sadly, no. She was right back in 10th grade, blushing crazily in front of Noah Kincaid, not knowing what to say or how to say it. Well, not anymore. This was the new her. This was her chance to exercise those old memories and become the woman she'd always wanted to be. What better place to start than with Noah? She lifted her head and shook her hair out of her eyes. Damn, she should have gotten a trim before she came here, and smiled brilliantly. "We're not 16 anymore," she said. "I prefer Kate now, if you don't mind." He looked at her with amusement, but held up his hands. "Sorry, Kate." She nodded her approval at him, but could tell from the sparkle in his bright blue eyes that he was enjoying himself way too much. What was with him? She glanced down at the book on the floor, paralyzed with fear for a moment that it was some embarrassing title like "Sex and Lots of It, a How-To Guide for Horny Girls," or some such thing. But it was an innocuous thriller, nary a drop of passion in the whole thing. She glanced back up at him, and he was still smiling at her in that devilish way, like he was on the verge of revealing the practical joke that she was the victim of. She planted her hands on her hips. "Okay, Kincaid, what is going on? You're acting weird." He looked at her innocently. "Weird? I'm not acting weird." "Yes, you are. You're grinning like a Cheshire cat." "I'm just happy to see you." She narrowed her eyes again. "Uh-huh. I swear," he said, his grin widening. Okay, he was definitely up to something. She folded her arms across her chest and glared at him, challenging him, daring him to burst out laughing at her and point out the joke that she was missing. Spinach in her teeth? Toilet paper stuck to her shoe? What? What? "Kate, oh my God, when did you get here?" Paige's voice from the hallway broke the silence, startling them both. She appeared in the doorway and rudely pushed Noah aside to prance towards Kate with squeals of delight. "I'm so glad you're here," Paige gushed, hugging Kate tightly and rocking them both back and forth, her sweet perfume wafting over them and her buoyant curls tickling Kate's face. Kate caught Noah's amused grin over Paige's shoulder and saw that it had softened a bit into a look of pure affection towards his sister's exuberant display. She hugged her friend back warmly and squeezed her eyes shut, happy to extend her embrace with one of the Kincaid twins, at least. Paige pulled back and glanced over her shoulder at her brother. "Isn't this awesome? The triple threat, together again," she said. Come on outside, say hi to everyone." She grabbed Kate's hand and led her from the room, shooing Noah ahead of them. She babbled happily, asking Kate about her drive up, asking if she wanted something to drink, chirping almost incoherently. Outside, Kate greeted Lily and Callum with affectionate hugs, playing the "You look terrific" game, followed closely by the "How have you been" game with each of them. Lily's enthusiasm was airy and a little too loud, her quick kisses on each of Kate's cheeks a little too faux European, or maybe just faux Hollywood, to be genuine. It was Lily's chance to shine, Kate realized, to be seen as the welcoming friend. She and Kate had never been close as teenagers, simply friendly in the way that the forced proximity of high school often required, and while Kate would never describe their past relationship as frenemies, there had always been an edgy undercurrent running through it. Not quite jealousy or dislike, but something guarded and calculating, as if Lily were always waiting for Kate to slip up, or reveal a juicy secret, or do something awkward that Lily could tuck away and gossip about later. Oh, the problems of adolescence, Kate thought, with rueful nostalgia. Imagine your biggest problem being whether Lily Graham would tell everyone that you had worn the most heinous leggings to the movies last night, or that underneath all that cover-up you had the gnarliest zit she had ever seen, or that you really, really, really liked Paige's hunky brother Noah. Kate brushed off these memories and tried to focus on Callum's questions, something about liking living in the city, or maybe he was asking what part of the city she lived in. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw Noah stroll over and lean casually against the deck railing, his back to the lake, and fold his arms across his chest. Like he was waiting for something to happen, something he wanted a front row seat for. He was looking at her so intently, with such an odd expression on his face, that she returned his gaze, more to figure out what was going on than a need to lock eyes. He looked like he was trying to hide a smile or an outright laugh again, and yet at the same time, his eyes betrayed a kind of sober curiosity. Maybe even wonder? Whatever was going on with him, this was not the Noah she had expected. A jovial, rascally Noah she could deal with, but this Noah, with the inscrutable expression and, dare she say it, that serious, penetrating gaze, that Noah was starting to make her stomach flutter in that old familiar way. She tried not to look at him as Paige introduced her to the beefy gym rat guy, who turned out to be Lily's date, Carl, and the cute brunette, who was Noah's paramedic partner, Emma. Whenever someone new walked by, Paige snagged him or her by the shirt sleeve and tugged them over to make introductions. There was a John, a Carrie, someone named something like Bebo, Nebo, but Kate didn't remember any of them. It hardly mattered. Everyone seemed to be in that almost buzzed, happy-to-be-happy sort of mood that made new social situations a lot more bearable. She settled into an Adirondack chair and accepted a wine cooler from Callum, and was grateful for the chance to answer his questions properly. He had worked in a precinct not far from where her old office had been, and they joked about how he might have been the one to ticket her for parking in front of a hydrant out of desperation one day when she was late for an important meeting. She didn't ask what had brought him back, and he didn't volunteer. But as he sat comfortably beside her in the matching Adirondack chair, they talked breezily about how Cedar Lake had changed in some ways and stayed very much the same in others. He had always been a quiet, serious sort of guy, but he seemed a bit more easygoing and likable now, as though maturity had softened his edges a little bit. It suited him, Kate thought, feeling genuinely happy to be around him and all their friends again. "It's really good to have you back again, Kate," he said companionably, taking a swig from his beer. "All of us being together again." His gaze drifted lazily over towards Paige, who was telling an animated story to the group gathered around her, her face glowing with mirth in the warm, soft light of the setting sun. She looked vibrant and beautiful, even more so than usual, and for a poignant moment she looked so much like Noah it made Kate smile. Callum's eyes lingered on her a moment longer. Then he turned back to Kate with a bashful smile. It's just great having you back." "I should have come back years ago," Kate said, surprising herself with how true a statement it was. "This is home." "I know the feeling," he winked. When he brought up a funny memory from high school, A laugh burbled out of her with unexpected force, and made him laugh so hard he sprayed out some of his beer, which then made her laugh even harder. They both tried to contain themselves as they dabbed at the stains on their shirts, mirthful as a couple of preschoolers goofing around during nap time. It felt so good to just laugh, to just let go and be silly. But in a moment, she felt the sting of mature self-consciousness and tried valiantly to compose herself again. She didn't know why, was hardly even aware she was doing it, but she found her eyes drifting over to Noah as she glowed from the warmth of a good laugh. He was looking at her, and she got the distinct impression he had been looking at her for some time. A steady, almost heavy-lidded look, looking very much like Callum just had as he turned his gaze towards Paige. Her cheeks flushed hot with both embarrassment and a jolt of desire as she saw that hint of a smile tug at his lips. Then he lifted his beer bottle to his mouth and slowly looked away.